Oscar Piastri crashing. Heartbreak.
It was a disaster.
Did Ferrari mess up their strategy?
There's always politics in Formula One.
He's definitely going to give George a hard time.
Lindblad was awesome.
He overtook Norris and Hamilton. He's not even passed his driving test.
Fernando could only do 25 laps without sustaining nerve damage.
He's not scared, right? He's not afraid of finding the limit.
Strike him down, he gets back up. He gets back up faster.
So much of what they're running is ultimately untried and untested.
Where do we even begin?
The 12 seconds that they ultimately lost through not pitting under virtual, we may have had that race between Ferrari and Mercedes to the end.
Up to speed.
Well. First race done and dusted. And might I just say, I know I'm coming in with this very early, but Will, Jolie and I smashed those predictions. I know DC's not here with us, but Jolie and I did get that prediction right, didn't we? You've got to give it to us.
I've got to say, I was very happy and I was very confident after qualifying as well. Slightly nervous after the race start, which we'll come on to, but buzzing for us.
I think I was slightly optimistic on Lewis's chances and Cadillac's chances, but I've never been good at predictions. Just ask my friends about my fantasy Premier League acumen. It's pretty terrible. Should we do a quick race recap to get us started? Let's do that. The race was down to 20 drivers before the lights even went out. Nico Hülkenberg's Audi not getting started, and Oscar Piastri, quite incredibly, the home hero, crashing on the way to the grid. The home curse for Australian drivers continues. No driver has ever stood on the podium at Albert Park from Australia, and Oscar Piastri's race over before it began. But then we get to the actual race itself. And just as we were expecting from pre-season testing, those Ferraris were rapid off the line. An all Mercedes front row, but it was Charles Leclerc who took the lead at the first turn. And what really sort of evolved after that, I think, was a thrilling first few laps between George Russell, Charles Leclerc, battling corner by corner, taking, retaking, repassing for the lead, and Lewis Hamilton closing up to the back of them. Then Isaac Hadjar's engine went, and we got a virtual safety car, which almost everybody took advantage of, save for, you guessed it, Ferrari, who opted not to jump in and take advantage of that virtual safety car. That ultimately left them off strategy, off plan. Mercedes swept through and took a pretty easy 1-2, with Charles Leclerc coming home in third, and Lewis Hamilton right on his tail in fourth, and wishing there had been slightly more laps so that he could maybe have tried to put a move on his teammate. Good debut race for Arvid Lindblad, scoring points on debut for Racing Bulls. Max Verstappen rising from 20th, having crashed out in qualifying, to 6th. Points also on debut for Audi, which I don't think many people were expecting. So overall, guys, what did we think of the race?
Let's talk about Mercedes. I mean, we heard a lot of gossip. I mean, I gave it the big chat at the top that Jolie and I got the predictions right. It wasn't that unobvious what we had suggested. You know, they were the talk of the paddock already before we saw anyone on track this season. After the 2 phases of testing, we knew that they were coming out with probably something that was going to be the most competitive package. And that has now been confirmed. I think what's terrifying, though, for the other teams is not only did they set the pace throughout, both in qualifying and the race, but they did it comfortably. I mean, there was no point in the race today where we felt them under pressure, dealing with graining or tire deg, shall I say, and any other sort of other issues. They executed the race well and with total control of the race pace. It's frightening. I mean, often when we have these new eras, it's very much a sign at the beginning of the year. The first winner is truly the one who we know for a fact has understood the regs well. And I think this is absolutely no exception.
I'd agree with that. And I think when you have Toto Wolff pre-season really bigging up everybody else's chances and calling other people the favourites, you know that Mercedes are coming into it as favourites, because that's a typical kind of Toto tactic. What I find intriguing with all of this is the Mercedes factory team being so much better than the Mercedes customer teams and the Mercedes customers not able to extract what the Mercedes race team or factory team is able to from its power units. That's going to create a lot of head scratching down the grid for those teams that are purchasing in those engines to try and figure out what Mercedes are doing. Lewis Hamilton also, after the race, raising the subject of, was this anything to do with compression ratios, which is a topic we thought we'd got rid of, but we won't be able to get rid of for as long as Mercedes seemingly have this race pace advantage.
You've nailed it on the head there, but let's put compression ratios aside for a second. Mercedes have a very good record of being competitive immediately after major changes. We saw it in 2014 after the turbo hybrid era began, and then they went on to win, their first Constructors' Championship 7 following after that one. So they're known to get the rules quickly. I think what's so exciting is they have two brilliant drivers. We saw George and Kimi doing very well last season as well, despite the car not necessarily being up to scratch. And I think what's so exciting for me watching Kimi is he didn't have a good weekend. He crashes in FP3. He then, before the first corner, goes down to P7. And he's dealing with all of this, and he's still finishing P2. And look, we've seen it with past drivers. We saw it last season with Lando. He was very open about how hard it was on him mentally. With Kimi, it seems to be, strike him down, he gets back up. He gets back up faster. And I don't think we can let that slide. I think Kimi put on an unbelievable show this weekend. And I think it's safe to say he's going to give George a run for his money.
I have to say both of the young drivers, both him and Arvid Lindblad, did a great job today. But you're right, Jolie. I think that there is definitely something special about Kimi Antonelli. And I'm pretty sure, obviously, this is why Mercedes have picked him to fill the boots of a 7-time world champion, is because they see this potential in him. But I think that potential is the key word here, because he's got it, right? He's quick. We saw it last year, actually, in Albert Park as well, where he went off very early on in the race and he just fought his way back in treacherous conditions, where we saw so many of the other, more seasoned veterans going off and really struggling out there. He's not scared, right? He's not afraid of finding the limit. And that's why we saw him go off in FP3. He's kind of going to have to be reined in, which, as Toto has mentioned on so many occasions, it's easier to make a fast driver go slower and, stay within their limits rather than trying to make a slow driver reach that limit. So he's got it all. But will he really take that competition to George in 2026? Look, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. They've clearly got an extremely competitive package. I think, he's definitely going to give George a hard time. But I think it's going to take a little bit longer for him to, weed out those small issues like the crashes we see sometimes or small mistakes. And that's normal. He's only, is he 19? He's going to be 19 this year. He's just a kid. He's just a kid.
It's wild. But Toto must be buzzing. I think it's their first 1-2 since 1955 without Hamilton being involved. So you saw when the cameras span to Toto, he looked, he knew what he was doing. But look, he deserves it after this race. But let's see. I'd love to go back for a second to the very beginning of the race once more. We shouldn't expect the start of races to be like they were today. And, if you're enjoying it, don't get too comfortable, because it's a new era. We've had new eras before. If we look at 2011, the Pirelli era, it was carnage at the beginning. And then the teams gather data and things iron out. And I think, look, we're not going to have Mercedes learning. They're going to learn very quickly to not have 0% battery at the start again. So I think we can't expect to have such an exciting start every single race. And I think that will very, very quickly, be cleaned up.
It'll be interesting to see how the starts sort of play themselves out. But one thing you can't take away from Ferrari is that they anticipated the issue of the start, and therefore they have a smaller turbo on board. And that's something that the other teams aren't going to just be able to get around. So will Mercedes end up on the grid with 0% battery available? No, I don't think that will happen again. That'll be what I believe should be a relatively easy fix, something that they can easily learn from and change in the future. But they're not going to rock up to China with a smaller turbo, are they? So one thing that's for sure is that Ferrari have an advantage at the start, so we're going to continue to see play in their favour going forward.
We can't skip over the fact there were actually 7 changes of the lead in the first 10 laps. And the coverage, talking from the very beginning, the coverage didn't even show. Alonso went from 17th to 10. We saw that's wild. We saw Antonelli fall back to 7th. Lindblad went from 9th to 3rd at one point.
I have to say, look, there's been a lot of sort of debate about what this racing is going to look like, how it's going to feel. And Of course, the drivers have their opinions, and it's one that I think should be definitely taken very seriously. But I have to say, watching this race at home on screen, from the spectator's point of view, it truly did deliver. I mean, as you mentioned there, 7 different lead changes in the first 10 laps. Albert Park, just to give you a bit of context, on average as a racetrack, has roughly, if the race is dry, 20 to 35 overtakes. Last year it was wet, so I think there was around 45 overtakes. This year in this race, there were 120 overtakes. So you can say what you want, but it's definitely making for more interesting racing for the spectators.
I mean, 100%. And I think looking at the reaction on Saturday, everyone online was saying what's going on. We're seeing in qualifying, people are actually slowing down when they're meant to be speeding up, especially on the straights. And then today, Lewis, he didn't take a lot from last season, but he came forward and he said, this is a massive step forward from the previous cars. Is it too early to say maybe we jumped on the new regs a bit harshly?
No, not at all. I think I think the drivers are perfectly within their rights to say that they don't enjoy these cars and that driving them in qualifying trim is not what Formula One is all about. And after the race, obviously, a lot of drivers saying they didn't enjoy the racing. They thought it was artificial. They didn't enjoy driving the cars. And a lot of the passes happening as a result of who's harvesting, who's lifting and coasting, who's still able to push. Is that racing? Or is that passing happening as a result of drivers needing to look after their batteries and charge them, and just coming as a result of how each individual team needs to sort of manipulate these new power units in order just to get them around a lap? And I don't think we're really going to get an answer on that for a few races, because Melbourne is an outlier as a circuit, right? It was never going to be easy. For these new engines, they were always going to have to kind of lift and coast, I think, more than they wanted. So, shall we say, one swallow does not a summer make. It's possibly a little early to really have the answer as to whether or not this is going to be a good thing or not. And after the first 10 laps, which were thrilling, right? After that, was it a great race? I think it would have been a better race if Ferrari hadn't fumbled the ball. Because then we may have seen an epic battle between George and Charles, certainly those two. Would we have seen that continue all the way to the finish? We're never going to know. But I like to think we might have done.
Danielle's asked us on Instagram, did Ferrari mess up their strategy? I think the short answer is yes.
Yes.
We'll all agree on that one.
We will all agree on that one.
Can you try and make sense why they didn't pit under the safety car?
I think they just wanted track position, to be in control of the race, to be in charge of the race and lead from the front. But, Lewis himself questioned, even during that period, at least you should have pitted one of us and split the strategies. If you wanted track position, sacrifice one, but not both. And I agree with that. I totally agree with that. We saw it with McLaren last year in Qatar and the disaster that was for them. Fred Vasseur has come out, defended the decision, defended the team. But I think when you're in that position, to not react, and not react the next time around either while the virtual was still out, just to maintain track position.
I know. I mean, that point I was going, what's going on?
And the team was out in pit lane.
Once, okay, we can almost, not really, but almost forgive you. But the second time, I mean, what?
It was weird. And as I said already, I think robbed us potentially of a really good race between Ferrari and Mercedes. What I did like seeing, though, was a Lewis Hamilton more comfortable in his own skin, more comfortable in his car. Okay, not on the podium, but not far off. And seemingly a set of regulations.
Positive.
Yeah, and positive. And a set of regulations which, unlike the ones he's had to drive from, 22 through to 25, seemingly suits him a lot better.
I don't think we can skim past this mistake from Ferrari that easily, though, guys. I want to maybe just chime in on that a little bit, right? When they were finally out there, actually racing them toe to toe, I think that they just didn't have the confidence in the moment to quickly adapt their strategy to take them, to fight them for that victory. And, of course, you can either be offensive or you can be defensive. And it felt that they were just on the more defensive side today. And they shouldn't have been. And if they wanted to do that, they should have at least split the two cars. So you let one of the two drivers, whether it's Lewis or Charles, defend their position to the opposition, but let the other one try to fight them. I mean, why not? I mean, what was the risk? What did they have to lose?
I mean, in their defense, and I will rarely do this, but in their defense, I don't think anybody was expecting the tyres to last as long as they did. And that virtual safety car came out so early that I think Ferrari were probably looking at it thinking, if we can stretch these tyres longer, we can do it on a one stop, and everybody else is going to have to do it on a two stop. Therefore, track position is actually is actually beneficial for us. And in any normal race, that theory is sound. But because the tyres last as long as they did, Mercedes, able to stop that early and make those tyres last all the way to the end. I don't think anybody sort of foresaw that.
As you say, the optimal strategy out there on race day was to start on the mediums and end on the hards, and the pit window being somewhere around lap 20 to 26.
Bingo.
Obviously, that first VSC came a lot earlier than that. And you're right, Will, that's why Ferrari thought when they missed that first opportunity, unlike everybody else, they decided not to pit in that moment. They decided to go longer. Then they thought to themselves, okay, why not see this to the end on a one stop? Plan A is what they said, which is usually the original best possible strategy. Whereas they thought that the others would pit earlier and they didn't. But what they did, well, they didn't forget this, but what obviously is really important is that when you pit under a safety car or a virtual safety car, you gain roughly 10 seconds as to what you would typically. So pit loss in Albert Park is roughly 21 seconds, whereas under virtual safety car, that drops down to 11, sort of 10, 11, depending on traffic in pit lane. But it's a huge chunk. And at the end of the race, they were only 12 seconds behind the Mercedes. So
there you go.
Maybe they would have still finished where they did, but they could have at least fought for it. I don't know.
What that does tell us is, had they taken that same decision and the 12 seconds that they ultimately lost through not pitting under virtual, we may have had that race between Ferrari and Mercedes to the end. So are Mercedes as far ahead as they look?
It's just such a shame. After everything last year, and the year before, this strategy seems to be, you've got Lewis calling from driving saying, why aren't you pitting one of us? And it's wild to think that shouldn't be coming from him. That should be coming, from the strategy directors. You wonder where it changes and how it changes.
But it's good to see that they're in the fight. I mean, I don't think anyone expected them to be as quick as they were after qualifying in the race. So it's good news for them. It's great to see them both feeling optimistic. But I do have a funny feeling, given we are so early in the set of regulations, we're still seeing a lot of reliability issues across the field. And I'm sure we're still going to see a lot more of it. But the development race and the rate of development is just going to be really, really, really fast. And I think we'll see other teams entering the chat. You mentioned it earlier, Will. It was a bit surprising to see the other Mercedes sort of customer teams not really being a part of the conversation as much as we may have thought that they would have. But McLaren particularly have showed over the last couple of years that they have great correlation from their wind tunnel and the parts that they bring to track. And so maybe we'll see them getting a bit closer. But it was, we haven't even mentioned it. Oscar Piastri crashing on the way to the grid. Heartbreak.
Well, Naomi, we're going to get onto that because make sure you're not going anywhere. We are going to be discussing what happened to Oscar Piastri in his home race, and we'll be switching into music mode and getting your race playlist suggestions.
Well, if there was one thing I didn't have on my bingo card, because if you remember my predictions, I had Oscar Piastri second on the podium, but he didn't even make it to lights out. I did not see that coming. And honestly, we have not had an Australian driver win the Australian Grand Prix ever. And whilst I wasn't sure that he was going to do it this time, I thought that he would at least be fighting for it. And unfortunately, heartbreak before the lights even went out.
It really is. And you saw the cameras pan to the fans, and so many of them had these special OP hats on, and people were just saying it was silenced around the track. Obviously, Mark Webber raced there for over a decade. Ricciardo got a podium in 2014, but then was later disqualified. I think people were really, really hoping this was the year. And I'm devastated for him, obviously. What happened last year where he didn't finish the race, and to happen again, You've seen all his family at the track, it being his home race. And I mean, take away all of that, but it being the first race of the season, setting a precedent. I can't imagine how he's feeling right now.
No, and, look, he's taken a portion of the blame. The majority of it obviously comes from these new systems. He suddenly got a massive boost of energy that he wasn't expecting out of the corner. Pretty similar to what happened to Sergio Perez, actually, earlier in the weekend, where he had a spin coming out of the same corner. You look at Max Verstappen crashing in qualifying. I've never seen Max have an incident like that ever in any category, but that wasn't his fault. The rear axle just locked. And this is the major issue that you have right now, is so much of what they're running is ultimately untried and untested. It's still very much in its early stages. So very, very tough for him. If it was going to happen to anyone, of course it happened to him, because there's this home curse.
Well, it's so easily done. I mean, these are some of the best drivers in the world. And it's actually quite nice to see them make mistakes like that. Sorry, Oscar, to use you as an example, but I'm sure it makes the drivers in junior formulas feel a lot better when they see the best of the best making small mistakes like that. Whilst you did say, Will, correctly, that when you get a bit of boost in a moment like that, you are somewhat a passenger in the car. So, but yeah, my heart just goes out to him. I mean, he grew up a stone's throw away from the circuit. He had, as you said, Jolie, his whole family there. He had his own Oscar Piastri grandstand full of fans waiting to cheer their home hero to the line. And yeah, it was over before it even started. I mean, it couldn't have gone worse, really.
Let's send lots of love to Oscar, but switch to something slightly more positive, or, much more positive, I should say. Obviously, last year in Australia, we saw most of the rookies DNF, not finish the race. It was a bit of a disaster. And I know Antonelli and I know Bortoleto aren't rookies, so cool this year, but I think we need to take a second to discuss the young driver masterclass we saw in this race. Lindblad, who's 18 years old, he's the only
Lindblad
rookie.
Was awesome.
Finished 8th. He was 3rd at one point at the start. He overtook Norris and Hamilton. He's not even passed his driving test. We then have Bortoleto, who, in the first race for first Audi race, I should say, finishes in the points, finishes 9th. And obviously we have Kimi P2. So I think, a massive shout out to the rookies / second year rookies.
I think biggest hats off here to Audi, right? Because
absolutely,
they are a brand new entrant to Formula One. They are not taking a customer engine. They've had to design theirs from scratch to enter the sport. And so much of what these regulations were designed to appeal to manufacturers like Audi to get them into the sport in the first place. Testing didn't look like it was fantastic. They didn't turn up to the first race looking like they were going to be, getting out of Q1, if we're totally honest. And they made it all the way through, into the top 10 in qualifying. I thought their qualifying performance was outstanding. I thought the race performance for Bortoleto was outstanding. Going to be hugely disappointed with what happened to Nico Hülkenberg, but had that not happened, could we have had 2 of them in the top 10? I think we might have done. I don't think you can understate what a magnificent job Audi have done to get to where they are and to be that competitive in their first outing in Formula One. That is, look, okay, yeah, it's the old Sauber team and all of that, but to get that engine up to where it needed to be, that's a really, really impressive job.
No, but just to touch on Arvid Lindblad, because I'd love to, agree with you guys. I mean, what a star of the future. A Red Bull junior program has already produced so many young stars, and it was great to see him out there. I mean, he didn't lack any confidence whatsoever. I mean, he said on a few occasions that Lewis is really his hero that he grew up watching at home, and he didn't take any of that into consideration when he was rubbing wheels with him on track. And that's what you want to see. I mean, you can have heroes, but when it comes to being on track, you've got to just focus on what you're doing as a driver. And he did that. And to finish in the points on his Formula One debut, I mean, hats off. Well done.
But when we talk about things that we weren't expecting, Aston Martin, I think it's safe to say, were a lot better than expected. I mean, before the race, Alonso said that he is in a hard mental place. Newey was very open that the drivers were concerned about nerve damage by vibrations from the Honda engine. And look, they retired both cars, but I think internally...
But what? You can't say better than expected. It was a disaster. It's start to finish. It's a disaster for them.
It is if you're reading it from the get-go. It's a disaster. But given everything we were prepared for, we were expecting them to retire after lap 1, lap 2, lap 3, and
don't care.
And they didn't. let's also not forget Alonso from 17th to P10. You have to give them, they're not just necessarily deserving of credit because they've set the bar so low, but because they've set the bar so low.
Let's not try and paint this as some sort of success that Aston Martin managed to get a car on the grid, managed to get it to overtake a few cars when lights went out, and somehow completed more laps than we expected. And Fernando Alonso went back in the race, however many laps down he was. It's a disaster. This is the year that was supposed to be the one, the Adrian Newey car, the Honda engine. Lawrence Stroll pinned everything on this regulation change this year. This was the year that they came to fight, and they're not. And there's two really big problems that Aston Martin have right now. One is an engine that's shaking itself to pieces. And the other that I see right now is that they have started their relationship with Honda in completely the wrong way, because they've thrown Honda under the bus. Rightly or wrong way. Did they do their due diligence? Did they know that Honda was in the situation that it was in when they signed the contract to bring Honda back to F1 and have their engines? If they didn't, they should have done, because it wasn't a shock to anybody that Honda got rid of most of their program or lost them to Red Bull powertrains or wherever they went to, right? But if you're going to pin all the blame on Honda, that's exactly what McLaren did. And by the time Honda found their feet, which they will do, Honda had had enough of McLaren and had gone to Red Bull, and Red Bull reaped the rewards of all the work that Honda put in over that time. When you start off your first weekend throwing Honda under the bus, and in Japanese culture, pride and loyalty are so key. I just feel like they may have completely ruined that relationship before the first weekend was even over. And that, more than anything, is like, it's a disaster from every conceivable perspective.
Well, I guess the question is, what do we expect them to say, though? Because it is so obviously bad that you can almost, what do you do? Like, yes, you hold the fort and, say we're coming together to get this situation fixed. But the reality is, as you said, Will, as you very clearly said, this is a disaster. They didn't retire that car once, they retired it twice. In the space of one race, they managed to retire Fernando's car twice. Lance did more laps than anybody anticipated, but he didn't make it to the finish. And if there's anything to sort of look at as a positive, and I know we're like really trying to find something to be positive about here, but Fernando, I think, was heard saying that they hadn't done a practice start throughout all of Bahrain testing. They weren't able to get to 7 p.m. where all the drivers are doing a practice start. So at least if there was anything they got this weekend done, it's a start. And so there is a lot more data for them to go through heading forward. And of course, there's going to be a lot for them to learn. I think what was positive is we expected, or at least coming out of testing, their gap to them was roughly 4 seconds. And I think over this weekend, it looked a little bit more like 2 seconds. So they're halving it. I don't think that they're going to quickly shave off the next half.
Will was giving the thumbs up. For anyone that's listening, Will's giving sarcastic thumbs up. Look, Will, I'm not sat here, and I wasn't trying to say before that, Aston Martin, they've done an amazing job. They've turned things around. But as I said, they set the bar so low, and we weren't expecting them to do more than 1 or 2 laps. So,
but they set their bar so high. They set their bar so high. They said, we're coming to fight for the championship from 2026. This is the year where it all starts for us. And then yes, but if our barometer of success is that their drivers left Australia without permanent nerve damage, then
which, by the way, just on the permanent nerve damage issue, right? Because I think there's been a lot of different versions of this issue sort of across different broadcasters in terms of the message that the drivers were sending out. And some of them were a bit mixed. Fernando, I think I saw a clip of him saying somewhere that, yes, it feels horrible in the car. However, if it was a competitive package, then you could probably hold on to the end. So right? I think it's all really relative, right?
This and there's always politics in Formula One. Okay, Honda know they need help, and they are probably going to need the other teams to allow them to do something to a homologated engine that is supposed to now be static. Pretty much within the regulations. They're going to need some dispensation to do some major overhaul on their engine. And really the only way you can do that is under the auspices of safety. And so if you are complaining that your drivers are at medical risk if this engine is as bad as you say it is, then perhaps And, perhaps because we've seen it before in Formula One history, perhaps you overplay your hand in order to try and get what you need to get back up to where you think you should be. But as you say, Naomi, the fact that if Fernando had a competitive car, he thought he could have held it to the end, that does not match up with what we were hearing out of Adrian Newey, which was that Fernando could only do 25 laps without sustaining nerve damage. So it's when you start hearing different things like that, you have to start asking questions as to where those protestations are coming from and why.
There's clearly no united front across a lot of their messages. So I think they need to sort of have a comms meeting maybe.
I think we can all agree that Aston Martin is a disaster right now. And another thing that we aren't agreeing on is our music taste. We all seem, and I can speak for DC, as you guys can imagine, we all have very different music tastes, but we have got our own playlist on Global Player. Songs that we have been adding for race weekends. We've got from New Rules by Dua Lipa to...
I chose that one because we've got new rules in the sport this year.
Original. Love it. Love it, love it.
Thank you.
We've had, for Aston Martin, Will, you also added in Good Vibrations, which I thought was hilarious.
Well, it was the only song I could think of that had vibrations in the title. They're not necessarily good for the driver's nerves.
For Hamilton, we went for The Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine, which is a personal favourite of mine. And Russell, we went for On Top of the World by Imagine Dragons. So play along with us. Send in your suggestions.
I have a suggestion for an additional song for George, if I may.
Please.
I think we should go with Don't Stop Me Now by Queen, because we know that everybody's coming for them when it comes to the whole compression ratio debacle. So there you go. Don't Stop Me Now. I am obviously wearing, if those of you who are listening to this aren't seeing me, I'm currently wearing a Mercedes sort of cardigan that I received many years ago. And I thought I'd get it out the closet because obviously, Mercedes seem to be running away with it at the moment. George is leading a world championship in Formula One for the first time in his career, but I don't know how long I'll be able to wear this. Hopefully for him, it'll be long, but maybe next time I'll turn up with something different. Who knows?
You have to get your Ferrari jacket out of the closet.
Ferrari, please start sending me some merch.
I think I've got my blue Ferrari shirt still from Miami, so I'll bring that onto a future show when Charles wins.
Love it. I think we should make it a thing that we all have to wear something of a team. I'll go for it for Thursday.
Fantastic. Well, we'll leave it up to you on Thursday, Jolie. That's all we have time for now. Of course, there is so much to get to, and we will be getting to that in our next episode. But make sure you guys are following us on socials at Up to Speed Show. If you want to send us an email, it's uptospeed@global.com. We have new episodes coming out every Monday and every Thursday. So make sure you like, subscribe, comment, do all of that good stuff that's available to do to make sure you never miss an episode.
We'll see you on Thursday.
This has been a Global Player original production.